Welcome to the Dr. Dad's podcast, where a naturopath and chiropractor come together each week to share lifestyle medicine, health advice, and inspiring interviews with some of the top experts in health and wellness, bringing you the latest in nutrition, exercise, ancient healing, toxins and detox, your microbiome, mindset, hormones, brain, and much more. Stay tuned, we're going to teach you how to experience growth daily.
All right, welcome back everybody to the Dr. Dad's podcast with my main man, my travel buddy, my Costa Rican amigo, my hermano, right, as you'd say in
hermano,
Spanish.
Yes, hermano.
Yeah, see,
brother.
Welcome back to another episode of the Dr. Dad's podcast. We almost did live and on location in Costa Rica, but we are having way too much fun to record something.
That's right. Vacation time. We don't work when we're on vacation.
Yeah, but it's funny. We were having this.
Would have been though.
Oh, we were having this really sweet heart-to-heart conversation that one morning, right? I think it was the morning that we were leaving. We were like, dude, we should have pressed the record button on this combo.
We get into those good talks though, man. So it's like we need to be recording all the time. And we get to see toucans and monkeys coming down to grab bananas in the morning while we're drinking our coffee and just chilling. And it was beautiful, man. Loved our time with you guys, man. Like anytime we get to spend with you all is always it's beautiful, man. Like just the space we get to share with you guys. Like that's probably my most favorite thing. Because honestly, man, when you guys left that Friday, it was like this energy just dropped out. And I was like, oh. Yeah. Like you guys kind of like held the space and it was ready for us when we got there. And then when you guys left, it was very noticeable when you guys bounced. So. But beautiful time with you guys. Costa Rica was beautiful, man. It was hard to come back to home after being out there for almost a week and all that. So
yeah, when you guys are you guys don't have ocean there in El Paso.
No, very very much contrasted. Went from rainforest and water to dry desert dust when we got back. So. Yeah, it was a bit of a contrast coming back home for about a week, but I sunk back in, got used to it again.
Yeah. What is it? I mean, it's interesting how much we're impacted by our environment, and that's the kind of one of the themes that we're going to talk a little bit about today too. But what does that do for your energy system when you're completely out of your normal landscape? Like, what does the ocean mean to you? I'm curious because it's a very different environment.
You know, me and Chris always, when we're choosing environments to go vacation in or get away or escape, you know, we usually pick the mountains or the water, right? I'm more of the mountain guy. I mean, I love both, but if I had to pick, I'd want to run to the mountains.
Yeah.
Clarissa loves the beach, man, but they both have their energy, right? Like, it was just going into that space and spending that time for a week, like you and me were talking of, like, you're getting up and you're going outside and you're on the porch and we're already outside hearing all the nature sounds and all the animals. And then, I mean, we were jumping in the pool right away in the morning with the kids. And then, you know, we're going down to the beach and you're in the energy of life all day, you know, and just being around the water. There's an energy to the water, right? And it's just being out of your normal pace, right? Your normal routine. You have different thoughts when you wake up. There's a different energy when you start your day. I mean, we even talked about that fatigue we had at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
But it felt different.
Like a true fatigue.
Yeah, like what Dr. Nick was saying, what we were talking about just for our listeners, and it's interesting, and you probably have experienced this when you travel or you go on your little breaks, is usually there's a mental fatigue at the end of the day, and then there's maybe a little bit of the physical part when you're back home. But it's like the mind wasn't tired out there, but the body was tired, but more tired from we were just doing, man. Like we were out in nature all day. Like we're getting lots of sun, right? I mean, we were swimming in the ocean all day. I mean, there's all these things that we were doing, but it was a different kind of physical fatigue at the end of the day of being in that energy outside all day and then my mind was just nice and fresh at the end of the day. Like I didn't feel fatigue there, right? So that was very different on the vacation, but much needed, man. You know, it's nice to sometimes, I always tell everybody, doing nothing is something.
I love that.
You know,
That's
and I
really
did
good.
And it really is, right? Like I just put a post on our social media today about regulating your nervous system, and I was trying to think of these little things you can do throughout the day. And I honestly should have put that as number one, do nothing. Because we're so busy doing all the time that sometimes just doing nothing is actually something. And it's just like you're just tuning out and you're not doing anything. Like right now, we're doing a podcast, but I'm just sitting on my patio, just chilling, right? But just sitting out here, just like looking at the mountain, just doing nothing, that is something. And
Yeah.
so Costa Rica is nice, man. Like I love the water. I just like getting out in nature. I guess to sum all that up is it's the nature piece. It's just reconnecting with Mother Nature. And there's an energy about that, and there's a recovery about that. And I just think when we're back in our hustle bustle of our daily lives, we don't get that connection with Mother Nature on a daily, like we need to, right? And we're so connected to the planet, we're connected to her, right? And you have to find those moments throughout your week to just reconnect with Mother Nature, man.
I love that. You know, there's something that I think is really interesting that falls into line with this whole like mental fatigue versus physical fatigue. I think there's like it's almost like we have a hyper diagnostic mind or a hyper psychologized way of
We're
looking.
overstimulated, man.
Yeah, well, for sure we
We're
are.
overstimulated.
But I was gonna say too,
Like massively.
yeah, big time, 100%. But on that, we're looking for cerebral ways of how to fix ourselves. We're looking for very heady ways of solving
Gotcha.
issues. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I was thinking with is that we psychologize our trauma, our history, what's wrong with us. I think it's almost like we have this desire to really, I guess, conceptualize that on a very mental level. And there's like in the, sort of the world of psychology and I guess modern social behavior, there's this incessant need to diagnose, to uncover, to um, look for the pathology, right? I get pathologizing our behavior and what's wrong with us. And it's a very heady experience. And it's really
Oh,
interesting. Like
absolutely.
I think it's fascinating. It's really interesting to look at how all the different, life traumas and what cool names we can call them, from like dissociative behavior to narcissistic to all these different things. And then you meet someone like what we met, Juanito. So Juanito was our tour guide in Costa Rica. Came from nothing, in the sense that like he didn't have any of the like quote unquote modern day necessities. He just is basically living off the land for the most part. Has like very minimal income, and he's a tour guide now, so he'll do things from time to time. There's times where he has zero money whatsoever. He didn't necessarily talk about his specifically about his childhood, but I don't think that there was a father in his picture. Like there was like a lot of the things that a lot of us in the West would consider, real life challenges. And there's not like a like this man is just so integrated into nature. Like as we were walking
Very
through the
much so.
forest, he's like, tuning into the sloths. He could pick up sloths before anybody because he's just tuned
Mm.
into the nature. He so lives from his heart and from this connection to the land. The most of us in our cerebral, head oriented kind of lives don't have that ease of access to. And I think it's so interesting how it's so common for us in sort of the Western culture to really try to conceptualize, try to diagnose, philosophize, which are all super interesting things. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I tell you what, if you live there, to your point of that mental fatigue, and try to understand everything through that mental body, you're gonna have
You get
serious
lost,
mental
man.
fatigue. You're gonna be at a loss. That's
Oh
extreme
yeah.
disconnect. And so one of the conversations I really wanted to have with you today was like this discussion around productivity. What does that mean? This discussion of doing nothing is something. This discussion of habits that we can stack for the body, so we can bypass some of this like mental overwhelm of trying to always figure things out. Because I find it some of the most interesting therapies or tools, like even NIS, you're bypassing the mind and just getting direct access to the body. So I'd love to like what comes up for you when like presenting things in that way.
You know, it was well put, man, the way you explain that. Because like talking about Juanito again, like the guy is so regulated every day with his nervous system because of how he lives his life from almost like a habitual, from a lifestyle place, right? So to answer your question and to kind of talk about this is all about nervous system regulation, man. This is what I do all day. Like
Mhm.
when the nervous system is dysregulated, when your autonomic nervous system is dysregulated, your state is going to determine your reality. And I've talked about this on our podcast before. And so it's about that mental picture you were talking about where people are just like stuck up top, always trying to diagnose, trying to make sense of everything from the behavior and the actions and why are they doing this. Well, I always tell my patients, especially like the ones that come in, whether it's an adult or they're bringing their children in, which is usually when I have the conversation with the parents, is look, your child's behavior and actions right now is nothing more than a result of the state of his nervous system. And when you're dysregulated, you don't have control and a governor on the way that you're going to have impulses and how you're going to be irritated to certain stressors or the way you're going to react to certain stimulus in your environment. So there's all these things constantly happening around us in our environment, and the way that we show up and interact with that reality is going to be based off of how well you can regulate your nervous system or how well in balance that nervous system is. So to answer that question full-heartedly, if you're just staying up and looking at the behaviors and the actions of that person, you're going to get lost really fast because that's not where the answer and the solution is to correcting the behavior. The answer and solution is correcting the behaviors and actions of that individual is to get regulation of the nervous system. And then to bring it back to the beginning of the conversation, we talked about like connecting with nature, and there's just certain habits it's almost like it's innate into that lifestyle when those people live by the beach, right? Or they live up in the mountains and they're living off the land. Like innately, their lifestyle is supporting a regulated nervous system to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And this, I mean, it's different for everybody depending on our environment, right? But what I'm trying to get at is it's not always a mental thing
Mm-hmm.
when we need to regulate ourselves. Sometimes it's just a behavior that we need to have as part of our lifestyle that is a habit,
Mm-hmm.
like a behavior of connecting with nature, right? Or a behavior of grounding myself or spending time with my animals and my pets when I get home, or having these habits that we have to do because we know that when we have these regular lifestyle habits that we're more regulated, our mind is in a better state. You know, we're we're less irritable. We have more conscious control of our emotions, all those things. But you'll notice when some of these things start to slip and we notice that our behaviors and actions are changing, a lot of times if you look at your habits of what you've been doing, maybe for the weeks before that, it may not be a couple days, it could be it's been going on for weeks. That's what's led you to that dysregulation of why now you're kind of unraveling and your habits are changing and then your actions and behaviors are getting out of control. So what I've noticed with people over the years, Bud, is like when this is a long-standing thing because someone has grown up this way and they've grown up in a household where they've been dysregulated their whole life and they're trying to move into adolescence, let's say, and then they're having a really hard time regulating and they're having behavioral issues. Sometimes this has been an issue with some people for decades. Sometimes it's not an issue and it's something new because of trauma in their life and they've had repetitive trauma over and over. But what I'm trying to get at is the longer someone's been here, usually you're seeing habits within their lifestyle that keeps them there all the time, and it's really a lifestyle thing. Versus people that are good most of the time, and then they just have an event happen in their life, and then they need to be kind of re-centered, right, so they can get back where they were. So it's kind of different from person to person, but honestly, your daily habits play a big role in your ability to have balance.
Yeah, I love that. So here's a sort of an interesting way of looking at habits, and I'm pulling some of this information from James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. Um, and maybe I'll set this up with trying to get you to reflect on something that he talks about. So if we looked at the idea of a habit, we could have, quote unquote, good habits or bad habits. A good habit might be, exercising. A bad habit might be, scrolling through social media for hours on end. As an example, there's lots of other examples, of course. And so, what is a craving or stimulus towards the habit? I think that little twinge of a moment is one of the most interesting situations. So I want to frame this as like, let's say you get home and from work, and the prediction is that you're already kind of subconsciously and maybe consciously thinking about what's going to be happening once you get home. So I know in my mind, when I get home from work, I know that I'm going to be eating and playing with the kids or whatever, and all these, there's these little moments of knowing what is likely going to happen. And then there's like the little micro decisions that we make on a daily basis. Let's say a good example, putting your phone beside your bed and not turning it on airplane, or like keeping it off of airplane mode so it's still on. And then a stimulus would be the beep or the buzz or the whatever. And then the action, the habit is to pick up the phone. There's so much habituation or like without thought in this prediction. You already have set up the circumstances that when you hear the beep, you're going to look at your phone, as an example. So listen to this, and then I want to hear like what you have to say on these little predictions, because I think it's these predictions that are then leading to the next behavior. And what's interesting is when that next behavior happens, that could be like, let's say social media as an example, that's the next 30 to 60 to 90 minutes of your life, but it all happened in a microsecond. So listen to this. So the cause of the habit is the prediction that precedes them. The prediction leads to a feeling, and the feeling obviously stimulates the behavior. So maybe you've got some examples, but what do you think about, like, it's just that split second moment I find is so interesting that could literally take us on two different trajectories. And you sort of like brought in this beautiful understanding of regulation and like how much of our behavior is just on autopilot because of these little predictions. Does that make sense?
Well, I
The
mean,
question?
yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. So if you look at like Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, and if anybody's read his books or watched Rewired, he talks about how when you wake up every day, you pretty much are thinking about, what do they say, like 96% of the same thoughts that you thought the day before, having the same thoughts. And then your brain's wired this way. So then you have pathways in your brain because you think the same thoughts every day. You have very similar behaviors, very similar ways of looking at and framing things. And this is based off of like how you feel, right? Which creates your thoughts, and that creating our actions and behaviors. So to take that, when you think about that, because we're all kind of like semi on autopilot in our subconscious in the background all day.
Yeah.
And then if you take that into these little microseconds that we have to make these small decisions, honestly, based off of how we feel in the moment, right? So like you said, coming home from work, you're thinking about what that's going to look like. I'm going to eat dinner. I'm going to say hi to the kids, the wife. I'm going to try to ground myself a little bit when I get home, start relaxing, get ready for the next day, get the kids ready for bed, whatever that may be, pick up the house, and then I got to get good to sleep. So you're kind of winding your day down, but again, you're already in that state of what you pretty much probably already feel every day when you're coming home. And usually for most people, what is that? It's fatigue, right? I mean, most people are tired when they're getting home at the after a long day of work, and they're ready to wind down when they get home, right? But again, like that state of how you feel is going to bring forth a lot of your habits when you get home. So for some people, that may be as soon as they get home, they start grubbing, eating dinner. and then they hit the pantry and they start sugar binging
Mm-hmm.
because they're exhausted, and so they just start dipping into sugar when they get home. For other people, this could be something else. This could be things like they like to smoke a cigarette or a cigar when they get home, or they have a beer, or they have a glass of wine, because they're using a habit because they know it helps calm them down or it helps center them. But the problem is when we're using substances, whether it's wine or beer, or some people like to smoke cigarettes or marijuana or whatever, pick your poison, man. But people will use substances to regulate themselves. The problem with that is it's a very artificial way of centering yourself at the end of the day, and you're not actually getting centered. You're using a substance to do it for you, so it's actually an artificial way of feeling that regulation.
Yeah.
So I guess that maybe answers your question a little bit. So I feel like a little bit of that is already on default mode.
Yeah.
Because if you can't override all of that in that microsecond of that habit, then you're just going to fall right back into the habit that you're doing, whether it's a good or a bad habit.
Love it. So
I mean,
yeah.
On the positive end, if you have good habits, this is not a bad thing, right? Because you're going to wake up and you have these good habits ingrained in your daily behaviors, right? And like you're going to start burning those pathways, and then your brain starts creating those type of pathways to where when you're getting up every day, you're having habits that could regulate yourself versus constantly causing dysregulation of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to help you guys see the fact that, like, regardless of whether we're having the same thoughts every day or the same way as we're looking at things, you can either create something that's going to bring forth health and nervous system regulation, or you're creating habits and a way of living your life that's dysregulating you all the time, right? And causing poor health.
Yeah.
So it's honestly based off what we want to create of ourselves, if you ask me.
Yeah. I love that. I want to sort of ask you another question that is definitely related to this, that I think is also interesting, is that often when we get into, let's say we start to implement a good habit. Let's say instead of hitting the pantry, we just have a habit of putting our running shoes on and they're sitting at the front door. We have that set up before we leave the house for the day, for example. And then we have a prediction knowing that, okay, I remember I put the shoes there. As soon as I get in, I put the shoes on, change the clothes, out I go for a quick little jog, just to again to center and ground myself. Every time you do that, you may not have the euphoria of like, wow, I really crushed that run. It might have been the hardest effing run you've ever done. You might only make that run for 10 minutes instead of the typical 25 minutes. And this is just like one example of a habit that someone could implement into their day. But I think what's so interesting with this is, again, we sort of author a mental landscape for that behavior based on the outcome of that behavior. Because one of the next things I want to talk to you about is like outcomes versus the system.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But notice how in that moment we go like, oh, today was a terrible run. Like I was gassed. We start making new predictions about, oh, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this run after work. And I find it so interesting how quickly we can enable a good habit that maybe hasn't fully locked in yet, but we start judging it and making new predictions about the behavior of that habit just because, hey, you just had a shitty run. Don't worry about it. And we put more attention on the outcome of the run as opposed to the habit of just doing the thing. And today was a bit of a grind, tomorrow may not be. But how many habits do you think are dissolved as a result of that one assessment on that one day of that one habit that, quote unquote, is good for you, but you made a decision that it didn't show up in the way that it served you in a different time? So what do you think about that?
You're right on, man. It's interesting where we put our attention when it comes to those things. And I mean, you and me have talked about this a lot on the podcast, where we say it's not about the result, it's about the process, right? And we're always telling our practice members, like, look, you got to know what you want, which if you don't have your health, you want your health, which is fine. But when you're going after it, you don't focus on what you don't have and I need this and I want to have it. You focus on the process that needs to take place for you to get there.
Yes.
And so I think it's interesting the way you were actually describing that because, like we've talked about running on here with me. Like I don't like to run. I did it for a long time for Spartan races, right? And I actually enjoy it now because I had to do it for probably about a year and a half so much that I enjoy going on like little trail runs and stuff like that. But here's the thing, man, like every runner knows this, anybody who works out knows this. Some days you train and you feel awesome and the run's good and you feel amazing when you're done and you're like, oh man, it's so good. And like you feel that endorphin high and your body's just feeling good and you're floating into your day. And then other days you go out and you're like, oh my God, I do not want to do this today. And like every single step is like pulling teeth, man. Like you just don't want to do it. It's just like your body's yelling at you, like today's not the day. But the reality is, those are the days where you're growing.
Yeah.
That's when the growth's taking place. It's not happening on the days where it's easy or you want to do it or you're just falling into place with it. It's the growth and the evolution's happening on the days where you don't want to do it. And you're and again to what you're saying, it's the process. It's the fact that you just did it is the most important part. It's not about how it came out and whether the run was a great run or a crappy run. That's all honestly irrelevant. It's like I just did it. I created that habit regardless of how I felt, and we still did it, which that's the most important part because when you're really wanting to make changes to create that new habit, you have to just do it, man. Like Nike, right? Just do it. You just got to do it because it's not about the result. It's just about getting it done.
Yeah. So I want to take that same idea around a good habit and anchor that back into every single practice member that you and I work with. Because everybody that comes in has a goal. And just like in James Clear's book, it's like the goal is there for trajectory. That's it. That's not the end all and be all. It's just to give you some momentum in a specific angle or direction. So I would love to hear you talk about about that. Like someone comes in, I want to lose 100 pounds or whatever it might be. Like how do you help them shift that conversation back into the system? Because that's honestly where so many people get stuck. They get so stuck on the outcome. They focus on where they're not. They get back into their old behaviors, and it's a snowball for dysfunction. But tell me what you think about that.
Well, the biggest thing I'd tell you for weight loss, like with the people that come into us, is
and it doesn't have to be weight loss. It could be anything. Like
well, but that's a good, but that's a good example. Like I like that one because that's usually where people get stuck on the result, right? And they don't focus on the process.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing I would tell you is we don't focus on the weight. Like they come in, they're aware that they're overweight, they have weight loss resistance, but none of our focus during any of our consultations or our consulting and when we're working with and coaching, do we ever focus on their weight?
Mm-hmm.
We're focusing on their habits. We're focusing on the systems of their body. We measure those things. We explain to them, here, your nervous system is dysregulated, and because of that, your hormones are working overtime because you can't regulate your stress. And because of that, your body's not going to want to lose weight. And like we're showing them that we're a system of systems, and we're showing them how basically their lifestyle and their habits has created the end all result of where they're at that moment. And we show them that there is a process needed based off what your systems show to start supporting these systems to come back into regulation, come back into balance. And when they all do, your body innately, because it's designed, will go back into a mode to where it will burn fat for you, and your hormones will improve when your nervous system regulates. And we have to explain all these things, but the whole idea is to paint a picture for the person of it's not about the weight, it's about the process. It's about how you've been living your life and your habits. And then once we explain and measure what's going on, it's like, well, here's the new habits that we need to form. And here's the new things and behaviors that we're going to start doing, because it's the process of you doing these things that's going to give us that result that you're looking for at the end of the day and finally losing weight. So in all honesty, man, it's funny because when people come in, they always have like a number, right? Of like where they want to be. So like, let's say somebody's overweight and they're like 100 and let's say it's a female and she's like pushing 200 and she wants to, let's say, weigh 130. Let's say she needs to lose 70 pounds. Well, it's funny because they always have a number. Well, I want to lose 70 pounds. And then we always tell them, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Like, that may change as you start to lose weight and your body is going to, your body composition is going to change. And it may not be 130 that you want to be at, right? Like, you may be more comfortable at like 145 or 150 because maybe you have more muscle and there's less fat, but your body looks great and that's where you want to be. So it's not really about the number, man. Like, and it's funny how that's evolved for us because it used to be when we started weight loss is we would focus on the weight and the numbers, and like we don't anymore, and we have way better results with our practice members, the patients that come in, because we don't really focus on the weight. It just comes off as a byproduct.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, our focus isn't there, man. It's never on the number of a result. It's always on the process. Always.
Yeah.
And it has to be, because when you're coaching somebody, if you're not focused on the process and you're focused on the result, your client's going to be focused on the result too, and you're just going to stress them out all the time.
It's so true, man.
So coaches can screw up their clients because they're not portraying it and framing it properly for their client so that they understand that it's more about the process.
Yeah. So there's something called the Goodhart's Law, and we kind of talked about this before we started pressing record, but it's when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. To your point, you just described that beautifully. The original target was 130. And that was the goal, what have you, but people had an experience like this fictional person had an experience, and actually they feel phenomenal at that 145. But if they were to just obsess about that 130, it's no longer a good measure, right?
Right.
And so, here's another good sort of, I guess, example of this is like how we're taught in school. We're taught in school to study for a test. Everything's about the test. Everything's about the outcome. Everything's about the letter grade. It's all about that. But really, what do we really want for our kids? We want them to learn about the power of investigation, the power of critical thinking, the power in encouraging just this process of learning. And
problem solving,
but we're conditioned at such a young age to be focused on this letter grade, the result. Exactly. So I think it's like it's so hardwired into our nervous system. So another
I'm
point
glad
here.
You brought that up.
I'll say one more thing, and then please.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, we optimize for what we measure, and when we choose the wrong measurement, we get the wrong behavior. So measurement is only useful when it guides you, not when it consumes you. Go ahead.
Well, and how many times does that one happen, man? It's funny. So let's talk about that just from where people are placing responsibility for their success and whatever they're trying to change, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for example, let's say it's a doctor-patient relationship. If I'm a patient and I roll into a doctor's office and I'm making the doctor fully responsible for the outcome of what happens with my health, I'm already screwing up as the patient, because the doctor literally has nothing to do with the end result of what I'm going to him for. The reality is you're going to a doctor because he is a professional and he has studied or has experience of whatever it may be that you're seeking him out for, and you're using him as a guide or a consultant to help you address something with your health. But your healing and the outcome of what happens is not dependent on that doctor. It's not his responsibility. And he is someone you're going to get help from, and he may have to do procedures or therapies, or let's say it's a surgeon or whoever the hell that is, or a counselor. They're part of your process, but they're not the responsible party for your healing. Mm-hmm. So just at the front end there, buddy, it's like, well, who are you putting responsible for your healing? That's a very big part of just being conscious and aware of where that healing needs to take place and who honestly is in charge of that and whose responsibility that is. So just for that, man, because a lot of people will go to different doctors, and this is me included, and you hear that sob story, right? Like, well, I've been to this doctor and that doctor, and nobody's helped me, and they're already giving up. Mm-hmm. Because it's the doctor's fault they didn't get well. Mm-hmm. I went to them, they worked on me, but nothing changed, and I'm still sick. So it must be the doctor's fault. But then when you really look at those individuals, habits and how they live their life, they didn't change any of their lifestyle habits.
Yep.
They're sick because of them. It has nothing to do with the doctor, but they're putting all of their faith in just showing up to a doctor's office visit, either getting on a medication, doing a therapy or procedure, and thinking, I'll just do one thing and it'll erase the fact that for the past decade I've treated my body like an amusement park and I have horrible habits and I don't take care of myself. I mean, how often do you see that shit? And for my listeners, this is a constant. If there's doctors listening to this, you know that it's like a common part of your profession of like having to take care of people. When you take care of any, I mean, we've been doing this. How long you been a doc, Nick?
Almost 16 years.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. 17 this year. So you start to see this, right? And you start understanding, well, that's why that person's sick. Because all the responsibility of their healing, they place it on other people versus themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of guiding these people, with what you just said, is they need to understand that what they're measuring is going to have a big part of the outcome of how they heal and the result they get. And it's funny what people measure for their health or what their measure of health is. I mean, a lot of people just think because they're symptom-free, they're healthy. I mean, that's probably at the top of the pyramid, right? I don't have symptoms, I'm good, right?
Yeah.
Or I hear this all the time. I'm like, I'll talk to them when they're dysregulated. I'll be, so what's going on? Like, you've been really stressed out lately? Like, what's going on in life? And they just look at me. Oh, no, I don't stress, doc. I'm like, oh, yeah? You're the only human being that walks the earth that doesn't experience stress, huh? And they just look at me all like clueless. Well, I haven't been feeling any stress. I was like, well, what does being really stressed feel out? And of course, they'll name something severe that when you're really severely stressed, you feel it. But what people don't understand, there's this broad spectrum of how your body experiences stress. And most of the time, we only think of when it was like really, really bad and you were peaking at those stress levels that you feel and experience that stress. But chronic stress, you don't feel it all the time. It's just lingering in the background and you're stuck in a state that's keeping you there, right? So, I mean, to go back, I mean, we could talk about that forever. That what you're measuring plays a massive role in the outcome. You know, even as a doctor, I used to measure different things when people came in to do the work on them, and I got a different result based off of what I was measuring. Mm-hmm. Now in my career, 17 years later, I use a very different means of way of assessing the person's nervous system, their body, their energy systems, and I do it very differently now, and it gives me a completely different result. Why? Because I use different things to measure. Mm-hmm. So that tells me what I need to do for that person to give me the result that I need to get them because they don't feel well. But if I don't measure the right things as a doctor, I'm not going to help that person in front of me if I'm measuring the wrong things. So this doesn't just go for the person. This goes for the people that you're going to help guide you to help get help, right? It's a double-edged sword there, man.
For sure it is.
I mean, it's sad. A lot of people go to certain types of docs. They don't get better, but what are the people measuring? Mm-hmm. But they're not ever touching root cause.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because they don't know what to look for. Number one, they don't know what to measure. And they don't know how the body works to some degree with those systems, right? And so you have, and again, I'm not honestly picking on conventional medicine because as a whole, it's an acute type of medicine. It's not for chronic care. Totally. But the reality is they don't look at the body as a whole. They look at it as individual systems, which is why when you go to a doctor for just that system, he's not going to help you get better because it's not just that system of why you have a problem. It's
it goes back to what we said. It said when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So if the measure in that particular case is constipation, and then now you've got flow.
Yes. And that's their measurement. Oh, he's constipated. Exactly. Well, this pill makes him poop. I fixed it. Yay, I'm a good doctor. Because that person is constipated for other reasons, and you're not going upstream to figure that out.
Yes.
You're just giving them something to help them poop. Yeah. So to answer your question, that's why I got heated, because that's an exact example. You're absolutely right. That's exactly why we have problems in healthcare. Mm-hmm. It's because of what's being measured, and then it's the patient. It's not the patient's fault, because they think the doctor's responsibility is to measure the right things to help them, but they're not measuring the right things. And then when they don't get the outcome that they want, it's like you're saying, they didn't measure the right thing.
Mm-hmm. So on this question of, like, I'm thinking of different age groups. Excuse me. And I'm thinking of there are in it, and this is sort of a generalization, but not in the sense that I have some of my 80-year-old patients are willing to do anything and everything. I mean, I have others that are just so ingrained in their habits, and they're like, "This, I'm not going to do this. I won't do this. I won't do this." Um, and you have obviously an amazing tool to measure where they're stuck, and you can help them sometimes even in spite themselves, in spite of their own sort of lack of willingness to make changes. Although obviously everyone still has to do their work. The point being that not everyone's going to do the work, so as a doctor, uh, I mean, on my end, I guess I change my expectation of the patient. I try to find a way to meet them where they are, but maybe slightly better than where they are. But what do you think about that?
Well, to answer your question, man, and I've talked to you about this. This is what I've told you that I need you to get into doing this muscle testing and being able to map the brain and the body, because number one, you can get better answers there, but two, because I'm able to work on those aspects of the body and get people back into regulation, it helps them move towards making better decisions and changing their habits faster, and those actions and behaviors change. And here's the thing, that's why I say every doctor needs to learn these tools, because it's really difficult to take somebody when they're down in the dumps and they don't feel well, right? And they're in a bad mental state and they're dysregulated and their gut's trash and their immune system's done and they're chronically inflamed, right? And they have anxiety or depression. It's really difficult to take someone in that state and get them over here where you want them just by having them change the way they're eating, exercise, maybe take some supplements. If you're going to just focus on matter in the body, it's going to take a lot longer to get them to shift this consciousness that we're talking about to make these better habits, versus when you can go in and start reconnecting and work on the communication of the body to start jump starting it, is the best way to describe that. It's almost like a jump start. So because I'm able to do that, it helps people get more motivated quickly. It helps them start change those habits quickly, right? And that in itself is, I think, why we have the success we have, because I'm able to get them back in a better state right coming out of the gates, so that they can start making those decisions and change those behaviors. Because, man, I've been there, man. Like, if I didn't have a tool like the tools I use now, it's hard, man. It's hard to make changes in your habits and your behaviors when you don't feel well. People that are addicted to sugar, like, holy shit. It's like taking someone off crack. I mean, it's really hard. But if you don't have a way to regulate them, they're just going to crave sugar all the time, right?
Yeah.
Or if I have people that they're constantly stuck in panic or fear, which is why they run to certain habits. If they're stuck in that mental stress, it's going to be hard to get them to change those habits if you can't pop them out of it. And the beautiful part is, like with NIS and these things that we do with the field, within 48 hours of working on them, they're out of that state. And then they can actually find that ability to start making the changes. And yeah, man, and that's the best way to answer that. I mean, I didn't always have these tools, and it was a lot more difficult back then when I didn't use these tools. That's the biggest thing I would tell you. That's the secret of the sauce, is like being able to go in and hardwire those things a little bit to help them move along a little faster.
Well, it's interesting because it kind of leads back to one of the comments we were discussing about the predictions. Because I think, like, talking about a regulated nervous system and a dysregulated one, obviously one that's dysregulated, we're gonna move so easily back into our habits. But a nervous system that actually has regulation again, we might make new predictions. We might put those shoes by the front door. We might, set our environment up to one that actually supports our regulation. We were talking about travel and how the environment, you change your environment. Like, what if we live in a cluttered space all the time? Maybe that little re-regulation gets people to start to clean up their rooms. Something so simple yet can have such a profound effect. We're not reminded by disgust and mess and chaos that then just gets us to move into our craving, to get out of that state of friction of not liking the mess and chaos. We eat the donut instead of cleaning our room or whatever it might be, right? So, like, I love how you keep bringing it back to the nervous system because I think it's so important, especially for those people who feel like they're stuck in their habit loop and they really can't get out of it. And so we, there's so I did want to bring in like just a little conversation because I know we're getting close to the end, but just a little conversation around the Vitality Lab, the Longevity Lab. There are some things that we can do to habituate our nervous system into a new kind of way. So obviously, if you can get access to Dr. David Wardy and NIS and some of the things that he can do to us help assess, that's definitely a really important step. And then there's all the things that maybe are passive or supportive or other ways or tools that help to support the nervous system. Like we had a podcast on the biocharger, and so um, and I know that was a part of our vision with the Longevity Lab. Have tools that help people access a new state. Because when we're feeling that new state, we're more likely to make positive behavior changes, or we're able to feel something new in our body maybe we didn't feel before. I've had people that come out of a sauna and go, I feel like I've been reborn. Like people who haven't sweat in like years. That one basic mechanism of just perspiration has not been engaged literally for years. And like, what is this feeling? What is this sweat? So what are your thoughts around having these tools as a support system for someone's healing?
Well, it's funny looking at our whole conversation, man. I mean, it's a lot of this is just about better recovery for most people in this day and age and in this modern time, right?
Yeah.
Like stress plus rest equals growth, and where most people have the trouble is with the rest piece, and I tell people all day we're kind of like this, right? Our biorhythm. From the time we get up, we're go, 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 stress, 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 stress. And then by the time we're done at the end of the day, it's like, and then I'm supposed to go to bed, right? And then how many people have sleep issues?
Yeah.
Or energy issues? Just off what I described right there, at no point during their day do they have any down slopes of like calming the nervous system down and regulating, and then being able to come back up, do a little more work, right? And then coming down, recovering for a little bit. And this is just tone, guys. This is sympathetic, parasympathetic. When we're go, 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 high stress mode at work, we're in sympathetic. And then we need to have like a small break, even if it's just 10 minutes, 20 minutes, to kind of downslope, come down for a little bit. And then we can come back up, stress, 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 stress. But then we got to come down again, right? So we got to find like this nice biorhythm throughout the day of having the down slopes throughout the day. And I talk to patients a lot about this right now because I've found that that's actually makes the biggest difference is learning how to have a better rhythm throughout your day, which helps you regulate your nervous system better. And so like this could be things like you're talking about with the Vitality Lab, right? Like a lot of people come in, they use the Vitality Lab because it's just an area where you can come do self-care. So whether they run circuits when they come in, or they come sit by the biocharger, or they go jump in the sauna, or they do a limb circuit or a muscle circuit, they're taking an hour to just downregulate, to recover, to calm themselves, to just let the nervous system chill out. And like most people don't do this throughout the day, man. Like I've said, we're busy doing, 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 doing. An easy way to do this if you don't have time to go to like a Vitality Lab or take an hour out of your day is I'm actually talking to people a lot about that new Pulsetto vagal stimulator that you wrap around your neck and it hooks to your phone. Or you can just wear your Pulsetto throughout the day, run it for 5-10 minutes, like mid-morning, and then do it again mid-afternoon, and then maybe before you go home. And just using it 2 or 3 times throughout the day helps pull you down. Or let's say you work from home and you have a little infrared sauna. You could just jump in your infrared sauna for 10 minutes. And that actually will help your nervous system start calming down a little bit. So there's little ways that we can do this throughout the day to start helping things calm down. It could be just a walk.
Yeah.
You go outside for a quick walk, or if you have the ability to go ground yourself, there's grass outside or concrete outside. I mean, it's just little bits. It doesn't have to be an hour. It doesn't have to be 30 minutes. Just taking these little down slopes has a massive impact on the end of the day and how you regulated yourself and how the rhythm of your body works. And I think if people would look at it a little bit more simple like that, than feeling overwhelmed, like, well, I have to commit an hour 3 times a week to do this, and I don't have time to do that because I have this. Well, you don't need to. Like, buy a pulsetto, buy some of these vagal nerve stimulators, do it in little bits throughout the day, and even if you have to go, and that even will help.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's ways to hack this, right? I mean, for busy individuals, or if you have time to do self-care like at a Vitality Lab, then even better, right? But
and
it's all about
get some breath, do a little breath
rhythm.
exercise, right? Like it could be
Yeah,
simple
like
things.
there's a million things, right?
Yeah.
There's cuddle with your dogs or your cats. I mean, there's tons of stuff, right? Cryo. I mean, we've talked about all these things on this podcast, but the reality is it's doing it. It's
the
taking
system.
that 5-10 minutes to do it. It's yeah. And if you can find a rhythm of these micro breaks throughout your day, you'd be very surprised how these micro breaks help you do a whole lot more with less stress, and you actually feel better, and you make better decisions because you feel better. Because when you're under constant stress and you're out of rhythm, you're not going to make those better choices. You're not going to have those habits, and it's going to be a lot harder to change those habits. A regulated nervous system will always help you make better decision making, better problem solving. It helps you see things as they are, because when you're dysregulated, you are blind. You are not seeing things the way that they are, and it causes more chaos.
Yeah. Well,
everybody knows this. Everybody can relate to this.
100%. And this is literally how we started this conversation. Was all the world that we live in is one of pathologizing, being so stuck in our cerebral environment and not knowing how to access the heart, the biorhythms of the body, the regulation of the entire system. So hopefully, like, this just is some food for thought and some food for application, and sort of having that goal of whatever that health goal is for yourself, but also, like, how do you make that health goal more buoyant by building up that system of consistency and support and like you said, the micro breaks and all of these things together, so that you can be less obsessive, I guess, about being so focused on, I need to have this goal achieved by this period of time. Let's definitely put that somewhere in the fridge so you can see it, but let's not make that the end result. It's the infinite game of self-care, or the infinite game of being in this process-oriented framework that allows us to get back into our body. So, David Wardy, I love you, man. So much insight, so much wisdom.
On both ends, brother. I always learn from you every day.
Well, my favorite quote of the day was, "Don't treat your body like an amusement park." That was brilliant. It's the best one.
And buddy, it's great. I mean, it's true though, right? When we're dysregulated, we all turn into the amusement park.
Yeah.
We do, right? And when you're regulated, most of the time you don't. So you have a little bit more respect for that body, right?
That's it, man. All right. Tuning out, and we'll see you guys on the next one.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please be sure to subscribe to the Dr. Dads and share with your family and friends. You can also follow and interact with Dr. Nick and Dr. David on Facebook and Instagram for a daily dose of inspiration and the latest in health and wellness. Be well.